Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our second annual Affordable Housing Forum. We've got some great panelists ready to speak to you this afternoon. Um, just a couple housekeeping things. The restrooms are down the hallway to the right. The food will be out the whole time if you want something else. We also have to-go containers, so there's a ton left over. Please take some food with you when you leave. Um, the cards in front of you, there are 3 different colors, and I've put the colors in front of each of the panelists. If you have questions, we're going to ask that you write them down. You'll also be able to speak up later if you wish, but we're going to collect these after the panelists are finished speaking, and then Kristen is going to handle the Q&A part of the day. We have 3 different subject matters. We have Commissioner Paul Edwards here, Bill Mayer, and Liz George. They're going to handle the Grantsville project. And then we've got a rental sector that Paul Macy and Nina Beitzer are going to take care of. And then Chris Mullet with Community Action will speak about the grants and anything else he chooses to speak about. So if any questions, come see me. But otherwise, we'll get started.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm here to update you on the Grantsville project that's already underway, and I'm a little disappointed to see someone in the audience. He should be actually on a machine right now pushing dirt. I'm not going to call anyone out, Brian, by name from BICO, but if you happen to see him, remind him he should be pushing dirt. So I'm excited to talk to you about the project. I got involved in it about 14 months ago, about how do we fill a gap. This is not going to solve all the problems in Garrett County, but it fills a pretty big gap of home ownership where people can own their homes, right? And so Paul Edwards came up with it, workforce attainable housing. So it's set up for people that have jobs. Liz will talk a little bit about how that ownership is going to work, but the goal is the single family homes, that'll be 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with garages, and you'll see some pictures of that in a couple minutes. My goal is to shoot in at $250,000 all in, and that includes your appliances, your washing machine, your dryer, the whole 9 yards. And the goal is, so you have to be an owner, and you have to live in the home. So it's only for residents. So that's the number one caveat of this particular development. You're allowed to have a roommate, but you're not allowed to rent the house out without you being in the home. So it's a little bit different that way. We're also going to have townhouses. So we're going to have 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom townhouses with a garage, and we're shooting for 195 in that range. And then we're also shooting for about 185,000 for the 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse. So we're trying to hit that middle range of housing to help people get from rentals into this. I worked with the local banks, so Clear Mountain Bank, First United, and Millennial Bank have all jumped in and said, we're going to help people get the loans. So we're not open, any bank can come and be involved in the project, but those banks have said, we're willing to take a little bit more of an aggressive approach on getting people in the houses. It's not income-based, so you have to qualify for a loan. So you might say, hey, I have a credit union. Great, go to your credit union. You're more than welcome to use them to buy the home. And I know Chris will talk a little bit about, and with the county commissioners, first-time home buyers, there's a lot of incentives for that as well. The other part is that we're shooting for is that if you work, let's just take the single-family home at $250,000. If you work in Garrett County, that price might be $247,500 for you. So you get a little discount if you live and work in Garrett County. And then there's another incentive that we haven't dialed in all the way, but many, and you're going to hear a bunch of them today, the local community and even the national community has stepped up to participate in this program to get these prices where we need them to be. And so organizations like BICO, for example, had really cut their margins down as thin as possible. We're not asking anyone to do it for free, but we've asked them to do it as close to margin as possible. Their employees, if they want to buy a house, would get an additional discount as well. So a little thank you for them to participate in a program like this. Um, so really, the brainchild of this goes back years, but um, Dwayne Yoder and I'm going to pick on Doug Devlin um, did the initial drawings for this project, and they were amazing. And so they laid out the ground. They looked at a way to how to build a neighborhood, right? So my lens that I've been using the last 14 months is how do we build a neighborhood? Not a development, but a place where people could call home, and it would be a place that they would raise their kids, right? And so that the whole thought process behind the whole thing is how do you make this a neighborhood? And so right now, so Grantsville, it's been so successful, we already have people signing up without even knowing what the prices are. And right now, those aren't hard prices I gave you because with tariffs and the way the economy is going, but that's what we're shooting for, right? So we're hoping that's going to be the top end of those prices. But the Grantsville Land Trust started with this set of land right here. But about 3 weeks ago, this additional plot of land, a couple acres, came available as well. And so they purchased that. And so we've already expanded the project because of the need and the want that people are looking at. And so in this project, as you're looking at it, you can see these are all single family homes right around here. And then these are townhouses. And then these are also single family homes. Now, this is our initial layout. But we're also going to be driven by market, what people are wanting and saying they need and can afford. And so we're going to start right on this corner. So those first 14 houses are actually in the process of getting permitted and built, and the goal is to have them in by the end of this year. So the first set of 14 houses is going to be this section here and this section here. So let's take a look. So in the townhouses, this is if Maureen's not here, is she? So Deep Creek Design Studios, Maureen Schaefer and Doug Stork have been dynamite on working on this back and forth. This is going to be the first section of townhouses. So these are just examples of where we're going. And so here's kind of a look at what the facades are going to be. Right now we're shooting for no vinyl siding. We're looking at using hardy board or a composite to keep it kind of at a nice level. I think that's going to make a better neighborhood. It's going to give a long-term look and design and feel and make it feel like home. One of the things we're shooting for is they all have garages because every now and then we get a little weather in Garrett County. There's kind of the back view of them, and they're going to be plain, right? So they're not going to be super high end, right? They're going to be simple homes. The lens I've been using is when I was 22 years old, what would I move into? What could I afford to move into? They're not going to have granite countertops or tile floors. They're going to have nice cabinets, linoleum countertops, good floors. As a matter of fact, some of the cabinets I have in my house now, we would put in there, right? So they're not bottom of the barrel. They're still going to be good homes. And to me, that was important because I think providing pride and ownership is key. So here's just some layouts. With the garage, there'll be a furnace room. As I've been talking with people, to be clear, I couldn't have done this without Kim Durst. Without her, this project would be nowhere. She has been phenomenal on herding this cat, along with all the other cats that I work with, and also bringing people to me. So I talk to people, probably between 3 and 5 people on average a week, about where the project is, where we're going, and what they can expect. And here's just another footprint, a layout of that. The kind of show is going to kind of have an open floor plan, kitchen, great room, and then the bedroom configurations and layouts. So on the single family houses, they're going to be 2-story houses. We also have, for ADA compliance, we also have a single-story house that we're going to use as well. So we have that option for people that need that kind of amenity. And in the single family homes, we have 2 different designs that we're looking at right now based on the configurations. And just kind of show you what's going out there right now. And these are all preliminary. This is probably the 6th or 7th iteration of these, because as we're building, we're also trying to value engineer them, right? So make them as big as we can, as inexpensively as we can. Not cheaply, but inexpensive. And as we're getting feedback from people that are looking to buy them, Frank Vitez has been dynamite, along with Doug Devlin, about talking about how we make these affordable, how we can engineer them better, how we can maximize that. The products, the national builder, national suppliers have been phenomenal. A lot of them are not only giving us a non-for-profit number, but they're also discounting it a little deeper, because this is one of the first attainable workforce projects that's getting done in the country. And so they want to have their names on it, and that's kind of nice. When I was doing my research, Kim and I looked at maybe a dozen different workforce housing projects around the country, and people were spending $500,000, $1 million forming an organization to put together a committee, to talk about a task force, to think about doing something, right? I mean, that's literally what was going on. And I said, and these guys, Paul and the commissioners and Community Action came together and said, why don't we just build it? Why don't we take the $1 million and put it in infrastructure? And they did. So it's been phenomenal. It's going to look like things happened overnight, but Paul will go into details on how many years it's taken to get us here. So a couple things I just want to talk to people about. We talked a little bit about the banking. I really need to thank some people that have been phenomenal. Highland Engineering, I keep going back to John Sanders at Highland and saying, I need the impossible to do this, and it happens. I work with Potomac Edison and Columbia Gas, our utility companies. They originally had $500,000, $250,000 bills. They wanted to do it. They reduced all those fees to almost nothing for us. So they've been reaching out. They've been positive. The town of Grantsville, unbelievable, talking about permits and how we move forward. They've been dynamite and very responsive. Chris Kluss from OC Kluss was one of the first people I talked about this project with. He was 100% on board. He's the one that's bringing on the national suppliers. So he's gone to Owings Corning and said, how much can we get our shingles for? And he's passing all those discounts on to us. And that's the way that we're going to be able to build this project. Kevin Knoll has been dynamite on that. Again, I've already talked about Kim Durst. She's been phenomenal. And it couldn't happen without the Garrett County Development Corp. You know, with Liz George, they took the leadership and said, hey, how do we make this work? And it's been interesting to, you know, as you know, I own a couple businesses. So having that entrepreneurial mindset of, I need it yesterday. It's been neat to watch the government agencies go, oh, that takes 6 months. I go, no, I need it tomorrow or next week. And Brian will tell you, I'm like, oh, I want footers in 10 days. He's like, yeah, Bill, I know. And so like we were working with the fire marshals, we're working with engineers. Everybody has been responsive because they understand how critical it is to our community to have these kind of houses. And then talking with Dwayne Yoder and Community Action, because I haven't met Chris, this will be the first time I met you. I think this is going to fill a really neat gap where there's a lot of head pressure keeping people in those units because they have no other place to land. And so now what we think might happen is that they can jump from those houses or those apartments into home ownership. And that's going to be pretty neat for them. Kristen said I couldn't embarrass her, but I'm doing it anyway, because without her, I couldn't do the outreach to the community, the website design. Raley's has really stepped up in a lot of ways to help us get the message out, giving time along the way. Like I said earlier, Doug Devlin. So it's been neat to see how many people, the local companies that are involved in the project, all are stepping up, and they all understand what it's going to take to pull the project off. It means that it's going to be a short build window, but it's also going to be a positive impact for our community. And so that's kind of where we are today. Brian's moving dirt. We've got footers in the next 2 weeks, maybe, depending on, you know, that. We're working on permits that are going along the way. But again, my still goal is to have people in the houses by the end of this year. That's the goal anyway. So we're going to keep shooting. It depends on Mother Nature and a bunch of other things. We're not taking questions now, or are we doing them later?
If there's any questions for your segment, they're going to write something.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, that's my presentation. Thanks, guys.
forward and backwards. And just make sure you speak into the mic for us.
All right, I'll try. Can you hear me? Okay, good, because I'm pretty small voiced. So anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for coming this afternoon. It's an exciting time to talk about a project that some of us have worked on for nearly 3 years for me and some for longer. Very much appreciate Garrett County and their partnership along with the town of Grantsville and BICO. And again, I'll thank Kim Durst, who keeps things moving and reminds me via email that I need to sign checks and be in my office for that. So what is the Garrett County Affordable Housing Land Trust? It is a nonprofit entity registered with the state of Maryland. And we did this in 2 levels. We started initially with what is required under the Real Property Code, which is to file it with SDAT. And so it's fine that you do that, but the law itself isn't clear in that you get the nonprofit status immediately. So to cover ourselves, I did it twice. I also filed the nonprofit corporation, and we are in the process of filing for the federal exemption status, which will allow us to move forward on other projects and not pay tax on the things that we purchase, which will help us enormously save money. So we registered the initial land trust in 2023. And so to this point, I think that everyone has been waiting on me until Bill came along and kind of pushed me and said, lawyer time doesn't work for me. So there's a lot of writing involved in this project. So what does a land trust do? It's a shared equity ownership, basically, meaning that the homeowner buys the improvement, the land trust always retains the land, and by using this model, we can control the resale. So we're basically trying to keep it affordable in perpetuity, which means forever. And there's certain ways that you can do that in Maryland, and this law was passed in 2011. There's maybe 20 land trusts in Maryland. Across the country, there's only 380 of these. So we're kind of in a new territory in using this model. So how do you keep a homeowner from reselling this land? When the buyer buys the improvement and they get a deed, the deed is clear that they only buy the improvement, but at the same time, they have to sign an agreement with the land trust that also gets recorded with the deed. And that document has a lot of teeth to it, so if someone declares bankruptcy, land trust has the ability to buy the improvement back. If they are not keeping up with the covenants, same thing. We have a lot of legal power to actually enforce the covenants there, and most of you are realtors or lenders, and you know that a way to control the use of land is to put covenants in documents or do a ground lease. We are using the ground lease model. I'm a little behind on my slides here. So the legal requirement here, and this is what we're going to need your help with as realtors and lenders, is the understanding of how the land trust works and what the documents really say. And today's just an overview, but I intend to have a meeting with lenders, with realtors, and with attorneys, because the law requires that the land trust documents be given to a buyer 15 days before they can sign a contract. And they have to sit down with an attorney. The attorney has to advise them. They both sign certain documents that we also record in the land records that show they understand what they're buying, the use of the land, and the control that the land trust has. So there will be a certain point when I will ask you all to come back and sit down with us and do that. And I'm just going to lightly touch on some of the most important provisions of that lease agreement. So the homeowner has to live there 7 out of 12 months out of the year. They cannot rent it to someone else. They cannot live there 3 months and go to Florida for the rest of the year. They have to physically live there. The land trust has the right to inspect. They have the right to enforce these covenants. And the homeowner pays a monthly fee, just like they're in an HOA. It is almost like an HOA in some regards, and it will have certain HOA language as to use and repairs. If they repair it, they have to get permission in how they repair it. And they certainly can upgrade it, but the land trust has to be familiar with what they're doing because we are controlling the resale of it. And so how do we control that? Because obviously one of the reasons that you buy a house is that you want to receive the appreciation when you sell it. So in order for the land trust model to work, you have to give a homeowner some incentive to actually buy into the model. We have a sliding scale that we are going to use. Under certain conditions, they will get more equity out of it when they sell. Under certain conditions, like the longer they've owned it, the more they've improved it. Will they stay in Garrett County after they sell it? And are they working in Garrett County? And so once again, thank you again for showing up this afternoon. Very much appreciate you, and I look forward to educating you more in the future. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the invitation to be here today and share a few words with you about this project I'm very excited about. I want to thank the organizers of this event for hosting this forum on this very important topic. With so many of my former students in the room, I feel like I'm back in the classroom, but much like then, I'm just going to wing this. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, so bear with me. But I think Bill and Liz did an excellent job of talking about the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of this project. And as Liz said, sort of the next steps for us in the education part is how this works legally and the process of this, in which she'll meet with attorneys and real estate agents to really break that down. Because our big picture goal here is we take this project as phase one, if you will, and then move forward and be able to duplicate this throughout the county in different phases. That's the big picture, and it always has been. It has taken us an exceptionally long time to get here today for a whole host of reasons, one of which is just the gears of government grind eternally slow. And if you want to screw something up, get the government involved. So we have tried very hard to remove as much of the government as we can to let private industry and nonprofits run the project, and it simplifies things significantly. This project originated 10 years ago at 8 o'clock in the morning at the lounge of the Cambridge Hyatt with commissioners at that time, Commissioner Heimball, myself, and Tichenal, and the Secretary of Planning in the state at that time was Mrs. Wendy Peters. And she asked us the night before if she could meet with us and just talk about Garrett County and some of our needs before the Winter Mako session ended for that particular time. So we met and we kicked around a lot of things back then. A lot of the hot topics are somewhat still the same today, some of them not so much. Rural broadband expansion, school funding, so on and so forth. And we kept coming back to this affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it, housing issue. It wasn't quite the issue 10 years ago as it is now, but we knew it was an issue, and we knew that it was going to get worse. And so we talked about that, and we threw out a whole lot of ideas. And one of the things we came up with was, at the time, ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission, for those of you, this audience, most of you probably know what that is. The ARC is the federal government program to fund Appalachia. Appalachia is still the poorest region in the country, and so they set aside money specifically for that. In Maryland, only 3 counties qualify for ARC funding, and that's the 3 western counties, Allegheny, Washington, and of course Garrett. And that time, and most of that, all of the funding at that time had to go into economic development stuff, because the whole point of it is we need to make this more economically viable, so we want to do all economic development stuff. Housing did not qualify in that. It was not part of the picture. So we couldn't get ARC money, federal money to put into housing. It just wasn't something that they did. And the only way you could get federal funding for housing back then was if it was subsidized housing at federal poverty levels. And that is not what we were interested in at the time, because we knew then, and I think it stands out glaringly now, if you have $5 million, you can buy a house in Garrett County. A lot of them right over here at the lake. You can do pretty well. If you have more than that, knock yourself out. If you don't have any money, or if you're below the federal poverty line, you can find housing here. It's not as easy maybe as it once was, but you can find housing here. But if you make an average wage, if you are two professionals, a couple that's working as teachers or policemen or nurses or whatever, it's very hard to find housing here. You guys know that. I'm not saying anything that this audience doesn't already know. So we knew that back then. So we weren't really interested in more subsidized income-based housing. We wanted to figure out a way to do this. And I can tell you back then, 10 years ago, nobody was doing this. Not with government money. No one in any county in any state in this country was doing this kind of work. And so we really struggled with how do we move forward on this. And step one was to start lobbying the federal government to allow housing to be part of ARC funding. And I give a tremendous amount of credit to Secretary Peters, who carried that water and did a tremendous job of arguing to the federal government that this was needed. Got with other rural communities who were struggling with the same thing and really pressured the government to say, this is an issue. It's really bad in rural America, but it's bad everywhere. But rural America can't afford to do anything without federal money. Miraculously, the federal government listened, and a couple of years later, they included housing in economic development for ARC funding. The other thing that happened during that time was the development of the Western Maryland Economic Investment Board, otherwise known as the George Board. And that was set up basically for the three Western Maryland counties, much the same way, but this was a Maryland program to put money into projects for economic development. And from the very beginning, that group said housing is economic development, especially in rural America. So we now have two funding sources that we can tap that aren't tied to income-based housing that we can put into housing. And that's what we did here. And so fast forward 10 years, and it took us 10 years, A, because we needed to figure out a way to get the money, but B, since no one else was doing this, the other part was, how do you do it? Like, we were building the airplane in flight, and it crashed like 4 or 5 times, and we had to start all over again because we didn't have a model. And we really struggled with, how do we put taxpayer money into this project through procurement, which only delays things even more and increases the price. So that was a hurdle we had to figure out how to clear, which was a major hurdle. And the other thing we really struggled with then was the management of the property, because what we didn't want to do is put taxpayer dollars, general fund dollars into a project and make it so Citizen A could buy a house at $200,000 and 3 months later turn around and flip it for $450,000, because that just defeats the purpose. And again, that's not rocket science. So we had to figure out how to do that, and it took years between the work of Mike Getty, who was the county attorney, and then Liz came on board, and Liz and Mike worked together, and Dwayne Yoder, and they came up with this idea of a land trust. And that was the key that really unlocked the door. So now we knew the mechanics of how to do it, even though we needed to do, or Liz and Mike needed to do a whole lot of study on how to actually make that happen. But we had the mechanism to do it, and we had the money because we had money from the ARC, we had money from the George Board, we put some local money into this. And it is a fundamental obligation or fundamental duty of government to put money into infrastructure. Like, no one questions that. It's something that government does all the time. And our philosophy from the beginning was, if we can take the development costs off the developer, that's how we can artificially then deflate the total cost of the home. That was the theory from the beginning, and now we're able to put that into practice. Why Grantsville? We need to do a project where infrastructure exists. Obviously, if we would have went somewhere with a lot of land but it didn't have water or sewer, we would have been exponentially increasing the price, even if the county was paying for it. If we have a budget of $5 million, I'm just throwing a number out there, If I have to spend $4 million of that into a well and septic field to put these houses in, that's less money than that we can put into the other things. As it stands, Grantsville has water and sewer. They had available land that Community Action had. Community Action was a very important partner for us through this whole process. Part of their mission is housing. They did have to kind of bow out of the project because of the way that we're doing it and what their mission is compared to this. But without them, this project would not be happening. They had the property. We were able to make a very favorable deal to get that property in the hands of the land trust. Grantsville, as a public entity, was able to get grant funding to extend the water and sewer lines to the property, and then our money could come in and finish with roads, electric, stormwater management, so on and so forth, and here we are. So it has been a long, arduous road to get here. No one in the country is still doing this. We are pioneering this work. I'm very proud of that, and I hope you all are as well. We in Garrett County do a terrible job of patting ourselves on the back even when it is warranted, and this is one of those times that it is warranted. Kim has been, as Bill said, instrumental in this work. Mike Getty has been instrumental in this work. The town of Grantsville has been. Community Action has been. Chris has been. Dwayne Yoder has been. We could go down the list. There have been a lot of players with hands on this. And the other thing I'll add before I conclude is anyone can come up with the idea, but I really don't believe this project could happen anywhere except Garrett County or a county very similar to Garrett County. And I'll tell you why. Because through this whole process, whether it was Jim Heimball, Larry Titchell, myself, Secretary Peters, whether it was these guys to my right, whether it was Kim, whether it was Dwayne Yoder, whether it was any of them, nobody cared who got any kind of credit. They just wanted to see houses in the ground that people in this county could buy and live in. Like, nobody cared about publicity, press, or anything else. Nobody cared about who owned it. Like, the town of Grantsville wasn't standing at the table, pounding the table, saying we have to be more involved, or we have to do this, or we have to get something out of this. The county wasn't doing that. The state wasn't doing that. We were able to get people to come to the table that believe in the mission, love this county, know that this is a major problem, and are willing to sell things to the project at less than market value. They're willing to provide their services for less than market value. And that takes a lot. And so that, I think, is another reason why it might be difficult for other people to duplicate this, although I'm starting to get calls pretty much on a weekly basis from my colleagues across the state and the region of how you guys doing this, what advice do you have, so on and so forth. And my advice is get the government out of the way and figure out a way that you can work this through the non-government side. So that's kind of where we are, and that's the big picture. We are building this out now, and then our hope is we have a phase 2, and you guys have heard me talk about this a lot of times. Like, we want to duplicate this process in McHenry and in Oakland. No timeline. I can't sit here and say, if I wouldn't have sat here 10 years ago and say it's going to be 10 years till we're building a house in Grantsville. So I'm very reluctant to say next year we're going to be in McHenry or Oakland, because it could be another 5 or 6 years till we're able to do that. So I don't want to give anybody false hope. But what I will tell you is we persevered for 10 years to get here. This project's going to be a home run for the whole county. And then we're going to turn. The other thing, from a taxpayer base and from general fund money, I think Garrett County budgeted $1 million, and I'm guessing on that. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we're roughly around $1 million maybe of Garrett County taxpayer dollars over the course of several years. We took a field in Grantsville that was paying 0 tax dollars because it was undeveloped and it was owned by Community Action, which is tax exempt. When this thing is done and these houses are built out, it's going to pay, I don't know, $1 million a year in taxes back to the county. So you talk about a good investment and a good return on your money. From 0 to $1 million a year, I'll take that deal every single time, and so would you. So the same thing will happen then, obviously, if we're able to then invest in these other areas. We're going to get that same return on investment. More importantly, we're going to be putting people that want to live in Garrett County and work in Garrett County in those homes, who then will be rooted in this community, put their kids in our schools, work in our shops, pay taxes here, shop here, so on and so forth. So that's the goal. That's where we are. That's how we got here. Very excited about this. Lots more to come. Stay tuned. I know Liz is going to do a lot of education on the back end on this to make this really work from your industry and from the legal side of this. And we'll keep moving forward and building this out across the county. So thank you very much.
I'm not gonna stand up and get in front of the podium, and I wasn't gonna. Microphones terrify me. So, okay, live stream. There we go. I'm not a big fan of microphones, but anyway. So I'm gonna give you kind of an idea of why this is needed so much in the county here. My name is Paul Macy. I'm owner, broker of Garrett Land Sales, real estate, and I was also up until 3 years ago as a property manager at Garrett Land Properties for 14 years. I managed 4 subsidized apartment complexes in Oakland, Mountain Lake Park. So on a day-to-day basis, myself and 5 other managers would have people come in and we talk to them about renting subsidized apartments. So very common scenario, family of 4. I don't have a PowerPoint. I want you to use your minds and go back to when you may have been in your mid-20s or so and married or not. But for our purposes here, family of 4, 2 kids. We're working full-time. Both are working full-time, possibly minimum wage, $15 an hour. And you're making so much per year. You come into Garrett Land and say, hey, I'm interested in getting an apartment. Wonderful. Let's have you fill out an application. Fill out an application. Of course, you have to prove all your income. Gross income. Didn't have to, we weren't worried about bills or anything of that nature. Unfortunately, that's not taken into consideration, the bills that you're already going to incur. So gross income, and a little bit of stipend for children, but not a whole lot. And then once you fill out the application, great, we'll put you on a wait list. Well, I mean, I would like to get out of my parents', we'd like to get out of my parents' house now. Well, I understand, but there's 40 people ahead of you, 30 people ahead of you. I just got these numbers last night of the wait lists at Garrett Land. And when I was there 3 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for a year that people would have to wait for an apartment. So that's going on right now and has been for years. So a family of 4, you're looking at approximately, I don't know, over $50,000 if you're both working full time. And understand that they're going to have probably childcare expenses and a lot of other expenses going on. They're probably maybe paying some sort of rent, but anyway, they're making over $45,000 a year. So we go through the whole process of what their income is and everything of that nature, and find out that your gross income as a family of 4 is $45,000, and let's just say 1 cent. You're overqualified to rent from Garrett Land at all. No subsidized housing is available to you. So what do you do? Where do you rent? And Nina, of course, can go over that part. But we had people, this was not uncommon, people will say, well, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna quit my job, and then we can afford an apartment so we can get into an apartment in Garrett County. And this is Garrett County, and we have some in Preston County and also in Allegheny County, but mostly in Garrett County. So yeah, if you made over $45,000, you're out of luck from renting from Garrett Land. So what do? Well, I mean, you can look in the paper, you can look on Facebook, Garrett County online, yard sale, PMS may have some rentals. So we've been there, they don't have anything. And then you're looking at market rents, which once again, Nina can go into about how much you're going to be paying for market rent because you're overqualified for subsidized housing. So, I mean, that's the situation we've been in. I haven't been at Garrett Land for 3 years. I was there for 14 years, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. Getting the it looks like some of the wait lists are down. They're shorter than they used to be, but still they're pretty long. So we really, as Paul mentioned, we probably don't need any more subsidized housing in the county, but we need to fill that gap, and it's a big gap, and we would see it every day. People wanting to have their own place, working full time, and then having to quit so they could qualify for subsidized housing. So, big deal. We need it. That's what I got.
Okay. My name is Nina Beitzel. I am an owner and real estate agent at Really Realty, also a landlord in the county for over a decade. My husband and I own 24 units in Grantsville, 9 units in Friendsville, and 2 units in McHenry. I wanted to talk about a couple of things as it relates to affordable rent in the county and also from a landlord perspective, and also kind of bridging the gap from renting to homeownership. So what is considered affordable when we talk about that? Affordability should really mean that the average local working person should be able to pay their rent along with their basic needs, which I would consider to be food, utilities, a car, etc. And this is assuming that they're working a full-time job. Most people who seem to need affordable housing in our area really are only making $15, maybe $17 an hour, give or take, to put that into perspective. As a landlord, what rent do I feel is appealing to local renters and also sets them up to succeed? Really, under $1,000 a month without a shadow of a doubt. Units that are over $1,000 a month, that's very challenging for the average renter in Garrett County. From personal experience, I can proudly say that all of our units outside of the 2 that we have in McHenry are all anywhere between very low end $550 a month up to about $950 a month. So we do try to keep that under $1,000, and I'll talk about how difficult that is to do in just a bit. Obviously, if you own a larger home as a landlord, it might be very difficult to accommodate that monthly rent. But most people realistically need to be closer to even that $700 a month range. So the calls that we get, that's really where they want to be. They want to be $700, maybe $800 a month. I can also say that between my husband and I, we get, and this is very honest, we get no less than 2 calls per day for people wanting rentals. I have a laundry list of people that are looking for housing at any given point in time. We are constantly full. We have a huge wait list that's very difficult to work through because privately owning rentals is much different than the subsidized world. So, we're looking for a lot of different criteria. We're also really trying to help people out, but we also need to make sure that we're putting people in there that are going to be taking care of units, also paying their rent because, that is our asset to protect as well. So it's very challenging. How as a landlord can, we make these numbers make sense? So right now, holding costs are obviously incredibly high. If you already own a building or a unit, mortgage rates are very high. So owning a multi-unit is more favorable than a single family, but the holding costs are also just on the rise continually. We were just having the insurance discussion up here before this started. Our insurance for both of our buildings has absolutely skyrocketed, and there's nothing you can do about it. So from a landlord perspective, a lot of people from a renter perspective or the community kind of look at these landlords and say, oh, they're charging $900 a month for a 2-bedroom unit, they should be charging $600, and really have no concept of what the holding costs are. And they assume that landlords in this county are making money hand over foot, and that is absolutely not the case. So I'm sure there's a couple people maybe that applies to, if they were lucky enough to buy a long time ago or maybe inherit a property, but otherwise it is very stressful to make the margins worthwhile in the end while also keeping your rents affordable. So how do we bridge the gap as a community? Still considering, still constantly struggling with this since it's the chicken or the egg. So, I've always said you want to find, and I say I'll put a little pressure on the county on this one. I think there's still ways that we could explore to incentivize landlords to rent at affordable rates. I think that's something that we're still missing. And I say that because, an average person in the county, probably if you ask them, oh, do you have interest in purchasing an investment property? They would say, yes, definitely. If I can create passive income, why wouldn't I be interested? And then you get into the nitty gritty and they know what they need to charge for rent. And then they say, oh boy, I don't think I can make that work. Also looking at, the costs up front to be able to purchase these properties. The unfortunate piece right now, and Kelly is sitting here so she can correct me if I'm wrong. FHA, the beauty of something like FHA is if it's 4 units or less, I'm glad I remembered, 4 units or less, you can take advantage of that program. So you can have a low down payment, you can have 3.5% if you're a consumer wanting to purchase a rental property, and you can actually use the rent to help you qualify. So that sounds great, but the problem is just because of holding costs and what things cost to purchase right now, it's very challenging to make the numbers work when you're looking at 4 units and less. So then you really get up into, the 8, 9, 10 plus unit buildings and apartments. And that's where lending comes into play. Your commercial or investment based, you're 20 to 25% down to purchase these properties. I know some local lending institutions, and I can give First United a shout out. I mean, they have some ways to get creative with this, but I can tell you that you still have to have that money in some fashion, that 20 to 25% down, unless you find an owner who's willing to do some owner financing. So I think that's something where maybe we as a community and as a county can kind of come up with ways to, when we say we want landlords to keep rent affordable, we're going to need to find ways to help bridge that gap, to incentivize people to own rental properties while also, keeping the rents where they need to be, which is really under that $1,000 a month range. Another topic that's very near and dear to me because I've seen it the last couple of years more than ever is renters in this county and any type of financial literacy. So, we have an epidemic of renters here who find themselves in a vicious cycle of renting without knowing or having the resources on how to get out of that cycle and start building equity in something in their own home. We look at it in a very small lens that these people just can't afford to purchase their own home. The prices are too high. They don't make enough money. I can tell you that it's much more multifaceted than that. A lot of these people are paying more in month for their vehicles than what their rent is. And they had nobody guiding them when they were 18, 19 years old. Don't you dare buy a truck that's $900 a month as an expense. And we know things like that. It's very easy to go to a car dealership and get signed on the dotted line. There's really no one preventing you from that. So I see a lot of renters with very high credit card debt from financing everything in their life, from TVs to furniture. It is definitely an epidemic. So it's not just the affordability aspect from an income perspective. It is definitely all encompassing. And that's something that, again, as a landlord, I try to touch as many of them as I can. And I've helped a few of them go from renting, in our buildings to purchasing a home and kind of helping guide them through that. But that's also because of my years of experience in real estate. A lot of landlords aren't going to have that. So again, having some type of maybe community initiative. I know we have the first-time homebuyer classes and they provide a really strong base, but it's not enough. It's just not enough. And then another thing to really consider with affordable housing, and I can even say this as a real estate agent, even though I like to sell everybody houses, not everyone is meant to be a homeowner in this county. There are plenty of people that they're actually going to be better off having consistent, affordable rent. I know that business people in the room are going to cringe when I say that because we like to, have equity in things and build equity in our lives and in our assets. But there are just a huge sector of people that would really set them up for failure. And I'm going to ask some very pointed questions to the land trust people later in the Q&A section about that, and just, you know, preparing yourselves for people that come into homeownership that really aren't ready, as far as maintaining the structure of their property. And, you know, I'll just give a few examples. You know, renters, they don't want to change a light bulb. They don't know how to do very basic things within their units if they've been renting for 10 plus years. So kind of not forcing them, but giving them tools and maybe putting them in a light of homeownership without really understanding that that's going to be a huge burden to them from a cost perspective is also something that we just need to keep in mind. While it's great for a lot of people, homeownership is also not for everybody. So the main takeaways from what I wanted to bring today was, you know, it's very critical that rents must stay in a range where local people can pay their bills without having to regularly turn to credit cards for basic needs. So you kind of have to build your rent off of that structure, just assuming all of the other bills that they're going to incur, like Paul talked about briefly. More education really must be offered for financial literacy so that people have a chance to succeed whenever they're given these opportunities. And we need to find a way, in my humble opinion, to incentivize people to become landlords in the county. There's a lot of opportunity for it. There are properties on the market that would be conducive for it. But again, just margins are very difficult right now. So a lot of times when people become landlords, they're forced to charge well over that $1,000 a month, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of our affordable housing push. Another just kind of side note that I wanted to bring up as well, and I think Chris might talk about this a little bit, but it's great that Maryland is a very tenant-friendly state in a lot of ways. So for tenants, that's great, but it's very challenging as well being a landlord. So again, it's the chicken or the egg. I think a lot of people are shying away from being a landlord right now just because Maryland has enacted quite a few new laws and legislature that really protects renters almost to a fault. But you know, that's great for people that are renting. But there are a lot of situations for landlords that can be really stressful. So I think just making sure that that's taken into the conversation for the community to understand is really helpful. So that's all I had.
When I started speaking, I'm not on, I don't think. Am I on? Okay. So when I started public speaking for a living 35 years ago, somebody told me that you don't want to follow children, you don't want to follow animals, and you don't want to follow somebody with real talent. But here we are. So I'm Chris Mullett from Garrett County Community Action. And I want to lead off by saying that it's apparent to me from this conversation today and from all the people who have been involved in creating and sustaining housing in this county that housing is a public good, and things that are a public good are worth investing in. To create the housing that we have over 700 units of housing, and to create the new housing that's happening in Grantsville, multiple levels of government had to be involved to make that happen. And so I think there's a real role for us to begin thinking about housing as public good. And it certainly is. I come from a background of running a large homeless shelter. There is a cost to having hundreds of people on the street. Not just a social cost, but a financial cost. In Central Florida, 10 years ago, there was a study done on the cost of chronic homelessness. The cost of having a chronically homeless person on the street in Central Florida was $31,000 a year. That included incarceration, ambulance rides, ER visits, hospitalizations, vandalism, anything that could be counted as a cost of what would happen if somebody was left outside for a year. There was a program developed through this Housing First initiative that would create housing with case management surrounding a person with services, and that cost $12,000 per person. So to house someone who was chronically homeless was a $19,000 a year savings. Now, I don't know what that would have been in the Orlando area, how many people and how many millions of dollars that would have added up to, but it's an enormous savings. And yet people could not be convinced that it was within the public good to create housing, sustainable housing for chronically unhoused people. And so I think that there's a real need to begin thinking about that. We are the Section 8 voucher agency in the county, and are there 150 right now, Shawnee, around? 153 vouchers that we have issued, and so just this week I sat down and wrote or signed 153 rent checks that went to, maybe some of you got them, if you own rental property and have some Section 8 properties. That there are 364 people, is what Kate told me, who administers our Section 8 program, 364 people who have qualified, but they're on the waiting list for one of those 153 vouchers. We own of the property that Garrett Land manages. I'm not sure what percentage of your business is tied up with community action properties, but they manage almost 700 of our units at Garrett Land. So we have over 700 units of rental property in the
But people need to understand that the Section 8 vouchers are only taken at some, like half of those.
We don't. Those things are not tied together.
Right.
So we have over 700 units of rental property, and as Paul said earlier, people have to wait more than a year, and that's best case scenario to get into one of those apartments. And so there's just this huge gap, and what that's causing, as Paul alluded earlier, was the drop in our public school enrollment. It's been extreme over the last decade, and that's resulted in schools closing. We're having a big community issue right now about closing the school in accident. I don't know where that is in the process, if it's happening or not happening, but I know that it's been a big issue, as it always is when you're trying to close a community school. But why is that happening? Because there's not places for people to live. I have a lot of staff that live in West Virginia because it's cheaper and it's a close enough drive for anybody working in Garrett County. We have staff members that live in Pennsylvania, Allegheny County. I live in Allegheny County. People said when I got this job, are you going to move to Garrett County? I said, if my house was sitting in Garrett County, it would cost $450,000. I couldn't possibly buy what I have there up here. Not a chance. So I drive up Backbone Mountain every day, which is lovely, by the way. I love it. And don't regret that at all, because I'm a podcast person. So it's an educational opportunity. But I think that it's important that we see housing as a public good, and that we see it as something that takes a lot of time and a lot of people. It's multiple levels of government. It's private industry. It's nonprofits, and it's lenders and realtors. It's people who decide that it matters. I had a local businessman take me to breakfast a couple of weeks ago to say, hey, I have employees that I'm paying a pretty good wage to, and there's no place for them to live here. We need to work together to create a housing development where people can afford to live. And I talked to him about Grantsville and what they're doing there. But that's it takes a lot. And I think that it's important to recognize that this isn't just going to happen. So for any of you who are so minded, right, there's been a group of people working on Grantsville. Maybe you want to work on something else. It's going to take us all coming together. So a couple of things about this that we have to offer, and there's a brochure in your folder about the first-time homebuyers assistance program. We've had a lot of success with this. This money comes from the county. It's given to us. Kelly Bernard, who any of you who are lenders in the room have probably interacted with Kelly about this program. But this year we had 40 vouchers. Those are all accounted for at this point. So I went to the county the other day and said, hey, not making a hard ask, but just letting you know that we could probably do 10 more of these if we had the money to do so. So that's in the commissioner's hands at the moment, and hopefully, you know, that there's a way to make that happen. And if not, that's fine. Again, it wasn't a hard ask from us. It was just a, hey, Kelly's done with the vouchers that you gave her, and it's been a great program, and Paul certainly recognizes that. The other program that we have used has been dollars that come through the county, but they're from Community Development Block Grant, which is federal money that comes through the state and county, state and or county, and that program has paid for anybody who qualifies. Now the first-time home buyers has a very high ceiling on the income limit, but the CDBG dollars were very much income-based, but would pay up to 20% down of the purchase price. Well, those dollars have gone away, and so that program is not going to be available going forward. But again, thinking about housing as a public good, what's it worth to keep a family in the county? What's it worth to keep a child or several children in our county's schools? What's it worth to have people shopping in our stores? What's it worth to have, you know, just all of that? So that's something that we need to think about as a community, and what we want to invest in making housing available to people. One of the things that Nina spoke about, and I have not talked to my staff, so this will be the first time that they hear this, but Nina talked about financial literacy. That's a huge, huge issue, and we do have a program, budgeting class and the first-time homebuyers stuff, and that's good, but it's not reaching enough people. It's reaching a ton of people, but not enough people, and it's I have discovered something that is just going under the radar and people aren't using, and that is the Family Self-Sufficiency Savings Program. And that comes with a, if you're enrolled in that program, not only do you have to take classes and that kind of thing, but if your rent goes up, the government will pay that, but put it in an escrow account for you. So as your rent goes up, you're building savings and makes home buying available to you down the road out of that escrow account. And so that's something that Sydney, our newest employee, I would really like you guys to take a look at that and see how we might embrace that at Community Action. I talked to our Secretary of Housing, Jake Day, and about this, and he said, yeah, this is just absolutely an underutilized program that's available. So anyway, that's something that we'll be hopefully implementing over the next 6 months or so. Yeah, so that's all I got.
While you guys fill out your cards, I have a couple of questions that I wrote down as we sat here. So, Liz, you talked about the monthly fees. It'll be set up kind of like an HOA. Do you guys have any idea what that's going to look like as far as what the fees will be?
No, we haven't gotten that far yet. We don't have final fees.
Okay, do you have a ballpark at least, or what you're shooting to keep them under?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you have any approximate range? Like, are you trying to keep it under 100 a month? Do you have any clue what that's going to look like?
I don't know that we've necessarily discussed where we want to keep that, but we certainly wouldn't want that to be prohibitive
Mm-hmm.
for
Okay.
someone.
And then is there?
So,
Yeah.
a lot of it actually there won't be many fees because of it's in the town of Grantsville. So the town of Grantsville is going to provide trash service, snow removal. So it'll mainly be insurance on the grasslands, the park. So minimal HOA fees.
Not the full scope of what a typical HOA
No.
covers. Okay, that was a follow-up question. And then as far as people living there full time, how do you plan to enforce that?
Paul's going to check the beds every night to make sure they're tucked in.
I know it's not going to be bulletproof, but just wondering if there's been something that's been discussed as far as enforcement, since people are pretty savvy.
A lot of the stuff that you're asking with the land trust as we go through this, we are just now getting into the meat of the individual agreements.
Okay.
Everything you've asked so far are those questions that we're mulling through in the administrative body of that.
Okay.
So
I'll
it-
ask a few more so you can add them to the list. How about that?
knock yourself out.
Okay. So will the land trust step in at all if homes are neglected? So just like I brought up about renters and transitioning to that home ownership and maybe not having the best basis for expectations of maintenance.
Yes, the land trust actually will, part of the monthly fee is for repair reserve. So the land trust does have the right to do that if you're not maintaining your property.
Okay. And then what about limitations as far as making sure it doesn't turn into like a retirement community, since there aren't income limitations? So I'm just envisioning, there could be 20 people that have cash that would love to get something for 200,000 versus having to go buy a home for 500 or 600. They're at that later stage of life. Like, how do we make sure that we're keeping this open to really the primary target audience?
Well, I don't think that we're going to just choose one target audience, but some of the incentives that we're building in are discounts if you work in Garrett County and you live in Garrett County and things like that. So in that respect, it will be it will look more, I don't know what the word is. Appealing, yeah.
Okay.
For a person that is, younger, just starting out, staying in Garrett County, working in Garrett County.
Sure. The only reason I bring that to the table is just because we know it's going to be this first project. How many total units are in the project between townhomes and single family?
75.
Okay. So that's a good amount, but it could dwindle.
Well, and not to disclose things that shouldn't be disclosed, but in the preliminary sign-ups, not that I know every single person that has signed up yet, but anecdotally, I would argue that the target demographic, if we're looking at younger folks that might be of child rearing age, that's pretty much what we're getting.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then just two more, and then Kristen, you can start the cards. I'm going to actually direct this one to Kelly or any other lenders. Sorry. With the land trust component, are there any limitations from a lending perspective? What is that going to look like? Like, will these qualify for FHA, USDA because of how the ownership is held?
Oh my gosh. It's something each bank will have to check within, but I believe from what we've discussed before, Fannie and Freddie back these with no problems, and
Awesome.
that would be the same in the sector with FHA as well.
Great.
Yeah, early on we brought in, it was great to see the president of First United, Clear Mountain Bank, and Millennial Bank sit at the table. And we actually brought that up specifically, and they helped write some of the land trust, or gave Liz some guidance on things to make sure they're in it to make it easy to lend.
Perfect.
So we
I
did think about
figured,
that.
but just wanted to make sure. Okay. And then this is actually last question for the subsidized housing, just to be clear, because this wasn't really talked about, and I could be wrong on this as well. But the rent, so the cap on income specific to what people pay in rent per month. From experience from other renters then coming to us, one thing that has been told and is regularly talked about is the cycle of subsidized housing and how it's very difficult to take advantage of it if you are bettering yourself from a financial perspective, meaning if you start at a certain income and then you're working really hard, you're getting raises, you get promoted, but now you're making a different income and your rent is therefore reflected as a higher amount. Is that a correct statement? It's very difficult to keep the rent.
Well, I mean, as far as from Garrett land, we had basically two types of housing, USDA RD housing, where the rents were based on the household income. It was 30% of the household income, but of course you had to stay under the income. If you started to go over the income, then you would not qualify for those units, and you'd have to move to a different apartment complex. Now, that being said, we also had tax credit based housing where, of course, the owners receive a tax credit for having lower rents. So once a household would qualify for those units, then they stay qualified. They could increase their income and still qualify for the unit. And then, of course, but every year the income guidelines change. And well, unfortunately, they don't. They get reviewed every year. I think they've gone up. I think they've gone up twice in the 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Dwayne Yoder, and I'm sure Chris fought every day, every week to try to get those income limits, because and correct me if I'm wrong, the people that are doing these income limits, they're not from here, and it's based on what they're looking at the average income in the county is, which is, it's not real accurate. Right. Okay. So people could qualify for a tax credit unit, and then their rents would even if they made more money, the rents would not go up, but the rents would get reviewed every year, and they could go up because of life. I don't know if that helps.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to some of our cards for the affordable housing, attainable housing project in Grantsville. Do we have an idea what the lease fee will be? Nope.
There is no lease fee.
I think it's the fee that would be
Oh,
like
HOA.
similar to the HOA fee.
It'll be the same. I mean, the HOA fee and the lease fee will be the same. And that's what I'm saying. We don't know yet.
Okay. They asked about the application process. Applications are open on GarrettCountyLiving.com. You fill out an application for a townhome or a single-family home, and there is a small deposit. Do you want to elaborate?
Let me talk about the application fee. So there's one way. When I got involved, I wanted to make sure there was no, hey, I'm somebody's best friend, and I'm going to be able to get that house. So working with Kristen, we put together, and the county, we put together a website that allows you to apply. So it's literally the first come, first serve. They come in. Now, you're applying for the house, but you're not applying for the loan, right? And so there's a nominal fee that's 100% refundable. Let's say you put it in today, you go home, and your husband or wife says, oh, what were you thinking? Get that money back. We give it back, no questions asked. It's a way to make sure that 10,000 people didn't sign up that weren't really interested. And so there's a $200 fee for the townhouse. I think it's $500 fee for the single-family home that either will be applied to your down payment or purchase price at the time of closing. So it's a nominal fee.
Thank you. And their other question was if, I guess, what are the criteria needed for the application?
So for the application, it's just that you go online, you put your name, email, address, and pay for it, and then you're applied. So you don't have to be a resident. You could be in California or in any state, but know that you're moving here.
Hold on.
Uh,
Yeah, you do.
Okay. As far as, oh, way to go, Mikey. Lost my train of thought. No. Actually, I did.
All right, give me the microphone back.
Oh, applications that have been received so far, can you say if they're mostly from Garrett County residents or
They're from the region.
outside
So there are
of
people from Garrett County. There are people from the West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Cumberland area. So it's a good, but the predominance are, most of my phone calls are from locals.
Local Garrett County.
Like they're already living here, trying to figure out how to get here, or they work here and they're like, how do I live here?
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Somebody asked if most of this information, the cost, amenities, restrictions, land trust, will be made available on GarrettCountyLiving.com, which is the website for this project. The answer is yes. Obviously, it's still fluid, so we're adding as we get them. But yes, all of the stuff today will get added to the website shortly. If we are among the first projects, how can Garrett County profit either financially or reputationally from our experience by consulting elsewhere with other communities? Is there a way to funnel this back into Garrett County? That might just be food for thought. I don't know if there's an answer.
I'll take a stab at that. I think that's a great question. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I mean, obviously, we would like the answer to be yes. I'm not so sure how you monetize that. And I'm not, one thing we did with rural broadband development, and again, a lot of credit to our IT department. We probably are the rural leader in the United States of America on how to do that. Our IT department gets asked monthly to go to seminars across the country to talk about how we sort of accomplished what we have accomplished thus far. And of course, if you're one of the few people in the audience that still don't have broadband, it doesn't matter to you, but we're still working on trying to clean up the gaps that still exist. But I view this the same way. We're going to have a lot of people want us to go talk to them about how we did this. I don't know, part of the way maybe that it benefits Garrett County is reputationally, which we have with broadband and the scholarship program, because we were also the first county in the country to do that as well. Not that I'm bragging Garrett County up, but we should. And that predates me. None of this has to do with me. It's the team here and people that came before us. But, the other thing is, if people will send teams of people here to rent places here, to eat here, to shop here for 3 days a week or whatever, to learn how we do things, I think that's how we can capitalize on it. But I don't know, you don't patent this idea and send it out there. The land trusts exist. What does not exist is how governments can work with land trusts to monetize it through a public-private partnership and make it work. But I don't know how you turn around then and totally monetize that for or should you? If it's a effort to solve a problem that's nationwide, should we limit who can access that and benefit their own communities? I think that's a philosophical question that we probably all disagree on to some extent, but it's also part of the question.
Thank you. Last one, can you explain the sliding scale of appreciation value for improvements to a housing unit and the baked-in potential for equity on resale?
All right, so the resale sliding scale is based on an appraisal at the time of purchase and at the time that you choose to sell it. The land trust board is comprised of, it will be 5 members at that point in time, and each owner will come to the land trust who will look at the length of ownership, the improvements, things like that, and decide and vote on their equity.
Thank you. This one is for Chris. Can you talk more about the program that helps renters whose rent goes up?
So we don't have a lot of detail about that just now, but it's called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program through HUD, and we will be investigating. You can investigate it as well, but it's on there. It's on HUD's website. But what it essentially does is, if I start out in a unit where it's $500 a month, and next year it's $550, and I'm enrolled in this program, and I have to qualify for that by attending the classes and pocket of money that's growing for me to use down the road.
How does the landlord get it?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. But they're not going to do without the, like, right? Because we all have, as I'm a.
Are they matching it? You're
That-
on.
Great question. I don't think the landlord will have any responsibility in it. I really don't think that the landlord will have, because it wouldn't make sense as a property owner myself. It would not make any sense for me to do that because we are operating at such a thin margin anyway that there would be no way that we could do that.
Okay, that was all the cards. Does anybody have a question they would like to ask in real time? Lana?
I just want to clarify that it is a totally first come, first served option then. It's not like you're going to review applications and make sure like one person fits the bill better than another, or how am I
Yeah, we're not letting
interpreting that?
Larry in, so you're not putting him on the list. Don't put Larry on the list. No. No, so it's literally a first come, first serve. It's really a list that says, here are the first homes. If you're in it, and you know, that's it. So it's literally a name, an address, an email. When the houses come available, we're going to say probably 30, 60, 90 days out, we're going to say, go to lenders. And we have some preferred lenders, and then they go to those preferred lenders. At that point, that's how it's going to work. So it's not, we don't know any, I mean, it's really a double blind almost to some degree. So it's first come, first serve.
So I liken it a little bit to like a retirement community where somebody goes on a waiting list for the next units
Yep.
to come available, and it's as long as they're financially able to buy and want to follow through at that point, it's their turn to do that.
Yeah, that's a good
It's
question.
not like you're going to look at, 5 candidates and say, we like this candidate better because of.
There's no like. So there's not, no.
Okay.
And so
There's no subjectivity.
no, there's such
essentially
a,
to it.
and actually, that's the whole reason why getting on the list early, get your name there. I've tried to look at what one of the other lenses I use about talking about building a neighborhood was, even though we're building this relatively fast, I've tried to build it in neighborhood chunks. So the construction vehicles won't be, 7 in the morning, power saws are running, trucks are backing up. And so trying to keep the neighborhood a neighborhood in chunks. So we're also building it out that way as well. So
For the realtors in the room, are there buyer agency commissions offered for the housing project?
So right now, we have a commitment from Raley's to do the project. They're going to be the listing agent. And I think they're doing it for free. And I don't know the exact number, but it's beyond generous. And so there'll probably be some kind of matching, but basically it's not set up for a double-sided sale. Yeah, thanks, Rich.
Larry Roby,
So that if there's no buyer,
hold it closer to your mouth.
if there's no buyer agency, then why would a buyer bring a buyer?
It's
The
not
listing
about
agent-
that,
the
Larry.
listing
It's not
agent
about
can't
that.
help the buyer.
Yeah, it's not about that, right? So it's about people coming in, and it's really not set up for a double agent buyer, right? It's not. It's set up. This is one of the greatest parts about this project for me has been watching our community put aside. I'm sorry, 3 bank presidents sitting in a room that that never happens. We're talking about suppliers and contractors that normally are clawing each other's eyes out for work. They're doing it for free or almost free. And so it's really not, it's not competitive. This isn't about putting money in the realtors' pockets, or it's about putting people in homes. That's what it's about. So it's not about the realtors. It's not about the builders. It's not about the county. It's about the homeowners. That's the lens I'm using, the homeowners.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Sean Sober? No, there were none online.
Qualify for first-time home buyer programs? Oh, sorry, thanks.
Yes. Sean's question is, does this qualify for first-time home buyers? Yes. Yeah, they're going to be able to use every grant that's possible. and ones that are out there now and ones that are disappearing, and hopefully some that'll show up that aren't here now. So part of it was with, Liz and Mike Getty and is really kind of try to navigate the legal side of this to make it as easy as possible for home ownership. Not putting blocks in the way where the banks go, oh, take that clause out, or that's preventing us from lending money. One of the bank presidents suggested, and I think he's going to follow through on it, that there's some people so financial literacy is literally the number one impediment to buying a home. I have one of my alumni from the Creamery got a job as an engineer, graduated from WVU, got a $90,000 a year job. And do you know what the first three things he did with his money were? Bought a new truck, bought what? A motorcycle and a four-wheeler. And then he went to buy a house. And now he's upside down, debt to income. And this is a smart person. Had he bought the house, he could have bought the house, the motorcycle, the truck, and the four-wheeler, no problem. And so some of it's educating all of us, not just the young kids, it's all of us on financial literacy. And so that's part of this as well. And so he's talking about the people that had medical bills, putting money into a small fund that they will take the high risk. Maybe they have good credit scores, but had a high risk because of illness. So the people are really stepping up for this program. It has been beyond compare what people are looking to do for this project.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Great question. I think the short answer is yes. What that looks like, I can't sit here and say. I don't work in the real estate world. That's not my world. Unfortunately, it's public education. I say unfortunately, I love public education, but it's got its own set of issues. But I would need someone with that expertise to come forward and help navigate that of what may work, what other people are doing, what legally we can do and we can't do. I don't think there's any question. I'm glad Nina brought this up. One of the things you'll notice that is lacking in the Grantsville project is rentals. In the very beginning of this, that was part of the project. It was removed for a very specific reason, and that reason was the town of Grantsville didn't want them. The other part is it's very difficult in the methodology that we're using to figure out how to put rentals in there. That aside, what I'll tell you is this group of commissioners would be very willing to work with any private side folks who have ideas to solve problems in Garrett County that we can work with. So it's a long-winded yes, but the answer is yes, and we would just need to sit down and talk about it and figure out a path forward for that. Right. Totally understand. And I think there's certainly room for that conversation, and I welcome anybody in here to have that at any time.
Just to piggyback off of what she said, in Ireland and Maryland and Pennsylvania, and what Pennsylvania does for taxes, there's some credits that they offer. So there's a credit that like you can get for certain properties like clean and green and like the homestead credit. Maybe the county could offer something like that for property owners that in Garrett County that have rental properties and they continue. You get a credit every year on your property taxes, and as long as you continue to, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, continue to rent it, you get that credit on your property taxes. And then like if you take your property out of clean and green, you have to pay the back taxes, you know. So like if it becomes you decide to move into the property and not use it as a rental anymore, then you would have to pay back the credit that you got for using it as a rental property.
One thing I would say, and I appreciate that, and again, I'll just leave this blanket and sort of task Connor and Kim to help me out with this. But, you know, if there are good ideas and ways to do what you're asking, certainly all ears, let's have the conversation and see if there's something we can do. As a side note to that, and a brief civics lesson for today, what some of you may not know is the county can have, in the way that our county government is set up, in Maryland, you can have 3 forms of county government. We have a county commission government. Basically what that means is we don't have a whole lot of power. And that's neither right, wrong, or indifferent. It just is. So some of the ideas that might be great ideas, and we can come together and say, hey, why don't we try this? We would actually have to have the state approve it through the legislature. And so I just throw that out there as a caution of, we may sit down and all come to an agreement, let's do this, and then it goes to Annapolis and they may say no for whatever reason because it's Annapolis. But just as a caution to that, it's not as simple as Garrett County just saying, hey, let's do this and this sounds great and let's put it in practice. We may need to get approval to do
that. One thing I'll say about this group of county commissioners in front of Paul's face, usually I do it behind his back, but they have been very nimble in thinking about how to think outside the box and how to create opportunities and how what that impact is about the taxes. And also what he didn't say is that the state actually sets the rates. So, or not sets the rates, but the state is the one that comes in and actually values the properties. So it's not a county agency.
Yeah, assessments are done through the state. That's
Just so you
not,
know. And
not
so,
the county.
but
Even though we got to pay for it now. But
so just so you know, it's a state agency that sets the value. But I found them to be very willing to look at this in an entrepreneurial way, which not many public officials think that way. So thanks for that.
I'm really intrigued by the last 2 questioners in terms of, you know, finding another way to support the existing housing that's already in the market rather than creating new housing to solve the problem. There's a saying in the design circles, particularly in around sustainability, the most sustainable building is the one that is already there. And it might apply to affordable housing, where you have the most affordable housing is the housing that's already there. Because, you know, as I know you've learned with the Grantsville project, that new construction costs have far outstripped the ability of people to pay on current incomes. They haven't risen to keep up with it. And they have to be, new projects require grand strategy, scale to pull off, and a long period of time to execute, while the need is there all along. We know through the tax credit properties how long they take to bring online and how many layers and the difficulty in pulling it off. And you know, while there's an inventory of existing housing stock that's not sexy, and some might consider some of it, you know, substandard, it would be far less to bring some of those substandard properties up to livable quality and keep in affordable rents. And the other thing is you have a diffuse ownership where you have more people that can do something faster if there was incentives to fortify that stock. So I just think it's an avenue worth exploring.
So just I'll touch base on that. Just I've actually done 3 houses in the last 3 years for my staff, and where we found old houses, purchased them, and basically restored them. And basically, we're ending up at about the same price, because by the time you buy the house, even if it's derelict, if you're lucky, you're around 100, and you're putting almost another 100 in it. But that's one way. and I haven't asked for some tax benefits, so that would be nice. You know, it's more about putting people in houses and home ownership. And that's the thing they struggle with, is to afford it. So what I found is that they're willing to talk. I think my suggestion would be, anyone that has a good idea, think it through from the standpoint of, how does it impact the greater good? How does it impact, and how does it, like Paul said, they spent $1 million for 13. That's a good ROI. You know, so how do you do that? How can that be duplicated? And I think we have smart people in the community, and talking about that and incentivizing that is a good way to go.
There might be some folks in the room that will look at me sideways about this. We haven't brought up the thought about ADUs, additional dwelling units. I mentioned it at the last forum that we had, and I don't know if anyone is already looking at that. Maybe Paul may know. I just heard this morning, so I have very little detail, that the state passed something in relation to additional dwelling units in zoned areas. So in case someone doesn't know, additional dwelling unit would be where a current homeowner would have the option of adding, putting another dwelling on the property with their existing home, be it for young folks that don't have any place to live, being it a parent that needs to move back and live close. The challenge, particularly, I know Paul and I have talked about this in Garrett County, with so much unzoned area and so much area relying on well and septic, that it becomes a challenge, more probably in the septic than the well issue. So it's really a health department kind of situation. But within the zoned areas, or areas that have infrastructure available that can serve additional water and sewer needs, I wonder if it's something that we want to bring to the table among the affordable housing forum in general.
The only thing I'll mention on that, I know that in the state's effort to try to address the statewide problem of affordable attainable housing, whatever you want to call it, one of the many things they put forward was exactly what you're talking about. Delegate Heinball or Senator McKay would be much better to speak about it than I am, but basically it's a state. The state put forth several bills in this year's legislature to try to push the locals to do more, to be less restrictive on trying to get more opportunity for housing. Let's just leave it at that. So I can't sit here and say exactly what. I was on the MACO committee that came before, and I know that the original bill had been amended multiple times, and what the final came out as, I'm not 100% sure. Those guys could speak to that. You're right, it does not impact Garrett County quite so much because the vast majority of our county is unzoned. The only zoned areas in the county, as you guys know, are the municipalities and then the lake. Everything else is outside of zoning. But those guys, you could search that and find that, and you could also talk to Jim or Mike, and they could probably give you more. But I think it would be, for future programs like this, that would be another conversation of what opportunities may exist.
Do you know if any of the municipalities are looking at any zoning reg changes?
I don't know that.
ADUs or any of the conversions or.
I do not know that. You would have to speak to them. I think the 8 municipalities in Garrett County are all over the map right now in what their vision is in regard to, I'm certain of this, as well as like Airbnbs and short-term rentals and all of that stuff. It's actually interesting that there is such a disparity in thought amongst the 8 municipalities and where they are with that. So I would, again, just defer to them, but the ones where you're going to have the most conversation, I think, in regard to all of these
Oakland.
land use issues and zoning would be Oakland, Mountain Lake Park, Friendsville, and Grantsville.
Right.
Those would probably be the ones that would have the most conversation around it. Not that
Right.
all of them won't, but I think the most would come out of those four.
Of course.
I'd add Kitzmiller to that too. I said I would add Kitzmiller to that list. I met with them a couple times about their plans, and they're trying to put together. They have a mayor and town council that is interested in growth.
Comprehensive plan. All 8 municipalities are up for updating comprehensive. Actually, they're all COVID delayed the redo of the plans, so they're all cut. They're starting now. This should have been done a couple of years ago. The state allowed them to push it back due to COVID, but interestingly, in Garrett County, or at least in years past, through Garrett County Municipalities Incorporated, the 8 towns work together to contract with someone collectively, which is, so I don't know how it's going to work right now, but I know they're all in the same queue, because the last time they did it, I was still the mayor of Grantsville and we all did it together. So they're probably 3 years behind right now, but all working right now to do that. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I want to be respectful of everybody's time. All right, Kelly.
If not, it's on. I just, on behalf of my committee, I want to thank you all for coming and attending. I want to thank each and every one of our panelists, who I think did an amazing job. Amy puts a